Right, I've got a little bit of a treat in store for you today. So, over the past few weeks, I've been contemplating how I'm going to be filtering my breeding rack downstairs in the cellar. And I've come up with all sorts of different ideas, but it's a fully plumbed system, and there's a fair few tanks on it that I want to run off all one sump, just so I'm not heating individual tanks and things. So, my idea is to get a sump. Now, sumps are very expensive. They're very hard to get hold of. And to buy a big one for downstairs, it'd be an absolute nightmare getting it through the door and down through the cellar stairs and stuff. So what I've done is I've decided to build my own. It's turned out really successful. It's a really cool bit of kit. So stay tuned and find out exactly how I've done it. Right, so I'll start by saying that this sump build is completely experimental. I've never done this before, so I don't know what's going to happen. I could build this and it could go horribly wrong and not work. But that's why I'm making a video, so we can document it. I'm going to have a good crack at it. But I'm quite confident that this will turn out being quite a good sump. Where I got my inspiration from is the sort of plastic segmented sumps that you see in some videos. I think Sickly Bros have got them, where it's just vacuum formed plastic segments that all plumb together. They come as a unit, so you buy them pre-made and you can just attach it all together, and it's like a PVC plastic sump. Impossible to get hold of in the UK. Glass sumps are also fairly difficult to get hold of unless you go out and spend a fortune and you get them custom made. You don't see sumps in fish stores over here. Not all that often anyway, not unless they're sort of off a show tank or anything. And if you want to buy them online and get them secondhand and stuff, you have to travel an absolute mission to get them. And then it's the problem of getting them in your car and finding ones that'll fit and things like that. So I'm going to have a crack at building one myself. And I'm using these plastic crates, and I'll explain to you why I've chosen to use these. It's because they've got the flat edges. Now, I've had this idea for a while, but I've always been concerned about using some of these crates, which I think is where you need to be careful, because a lot of them are designed like this one with a slight angle on the edges so that you can stack the boxes inside one another. But what that means is if I'm putting any plumbing, tank connectors, things like that onto these crates, if I'm using those with the tapered edge, that means my plumbing's going to be coming all off on obtuse angles. It's going to make it really hard to connect and get a solid watertight seal on any of the tank connectors. So these ones have got perfectly flat edges. What it does as well is it prevents any sort of water pressure building up more in certain areas of the plastic. And then fingers crossed I shouldn't get any cracks, fractures or anything in the plastic. I hope not anyway. And then it's got these little reinforcements on it as well. What I'm also going to try and do is incorporate the lids onto the sump. So if you've had a sump, we all know that evaporation is a massive con. So a lot of them are open top. There's water moving, sometimes quite violently, inside these sections, and that contributes to a lot of evaporation. So you can find that you're topping up your systems quite often if you're using a sump. Whereas I think if I can make sure that I build these lids in as part of the sump, drill some holes in for the plumbing and stuff, I can keep a lot of that evaporation in, and I won't be topping up the breeding system as much. So I'm quietly confident that this is going to work quite well, but we'll find out soon enough. Now, you might be wondering how this is going to go together and work. So we're going to have both sections side by side like this. This first bit is where all our water is going to flow in. So we're going to have our mechanical filtration, our sponges, as the first port of call. We're then going to cram this with biological filtration on the other half. And then we're going to have the tanks connected into this one where we're going to have a load more biological filtration here, which will overflow into where our return pump and our heater is going to be. Now, you might be wondering how these tanks are going to go together. We use these, which are called tank connectors. So they're similar to bulkheads, and these are 25mm ones. So I'm going to have two, which will attach to the sides of the tank. And then we'll get some PVC piping, solvent weld them together. And then that should give us, if we have two of these, it should give us a nice flow rate going through to this other section. And fingers crossed, it'll be watertight as well. My only concern with this setup is it going to be big enough? Am I going to need another one of these boxes? I'm not overly concerned about mechanical filtration because these are going to be breeding setups. They're not going to be display tanks. So if my water clarity, if I've got some bits floating around in the tank and stuff that the mechanical filtration isn't picking up as well, I'm not overly fussed about that. I mean, there'll be really small particles in the water. It'll just be a visual problem. So I'm going to cram as much biological filtration into this as I can. The only other issue I think I might have, looking at this now, is with the return pump. Now, because this is such a big return pump, this is the Z-Lite King Kong. It's quite an old one, but because it's 11,000 litres an hour, it takes up so much space in here. So I think it's a risk that the sump could run dry quite quickly. But I'm not going to know until I test it out. It's quite easy for me to switch the return pump over anyway if I want to get a smaller one. And then what I might do is attach some plumbing parts, some unions. So what unions are is they're like they're a sort of screw-in section what you get in your plumbing parts, which means you can take things apart. So I might add some unions into the connection, and what that will do is that will allow me, it'll give me the option to add another segment onto the sump if I need to. So it'll make it very customizable. So if I put those unions on and I solvent weld, it means I can still unscrew everything and add another section of the sump onto this to make it bigger if it's not working as efficiently as I want it to. So what I need to do now is drill some holes into the plastic so that I can start adding these tank connectors in. Now, I'm going to place the first ones in this section at the bottom of the tank, we'll call it. And there is a reason for that. So when this is set up in this first section, the water is going to be dropping down into the mechanical media. So I want the flow rate to be at the bottom, dragging that water down. So it's dragging it through as much mechanical filtration and biological filtration as possible. And then when it gets into the next section, I'm going to have a baffle down the middle. And then I want the water to then travel from the bottom upwards. So it's making as much contact as possible with the biological filtration on its way through the sump. So I'm going to mark this from the bottom, and I'm going to mark it 1.5 inches. And that is where I'm going to want to start drilling my first hole. And then I'm going to mark it on the other side as well. And then I know when I'm doing it on this side of the tank too, on the other section, then I'll mark them on the same areas to make sure that those pipes connect perfectly in line with one another. Now this drill bit probably isn't the best tool for the job on this, because ideally you want to be using a plastic a plastic saw edge, which is going to cut through it quite easily. I'm going to risk it. I wouldn't advise you use this, but I think if we take it slow, with it being so thin, I think if we just take it easy, it might not do the damage that I think it could quite possibly do. So wish us luck. Voila. Worked like a dream. Now we got our holes. Right, so now we've got our holes drilled, we can start attaching the tank connectors onto it. What you want to do is when you've done the holes as well, you'll have these little burrs on there. Make sure you're getting those burrs off either with a sharp blade or some sandpaper, because you don't want it to to cause any uneven surfaces when you're attaching these tank connectors. And there you go. Right, so all that's left to do is cut some pieces of plumbing, PVC, and then attach the two together. If you ever plumbing a tank, these PVC pipe cutters, absolute godsend. They're so easy to use. You don't get any burrs on your plastic like you would if you were using, you know, a saw to cut them or anything. They just cut through them like butter. So really good bits of kit worth getting if you're planning on doing some sort of plumbing project on your tank. And then we'll push these into our tank connectors. Make sure it all fits nice and even. And there you go. Take a look at that now. So you can see we've got the connectors in. And then they come with these little O-rings just to make it watertight on the inside. And then you can see where the PVC pipes we put in there are connecting these two sections together. Now, I'm not going to solvent weld this just yet because, like I said, I'll just get the camera back in here so that I can show you this properly. Like I said, on those two unions there, where it is conjoining together, I wanted to add one of these in between on the plumbing. Because when you solvent weld plumbing, that's it, it's done. You have to be certain that that's what you want to do. Whereas I want to have the ability to be able to disconnect this and potentially add another section on there. So what I need to do is add these unions in. And that means when you've got one pipe solvent welded in each end. So let's say you've put a pipe in that bit, and then you've got the rest of it there. If this is solvent welded, you can't take it apart. However, if you've got the union, then what you can do is take it apart, disconnect everything, and then screw it back into another union if you're wanting to add things on. Now, the problem I've got is I've got loads of these unions in a 25mm size, in a 20mm size, but I've only got the one in a 25mm size, which is an absolute headache because I need two. So I'll have to go out and buy another one of these before I actually solvent weld this all together and make it functional. But what I'll do is, for the time being, I'll just show you how we're going to build the rest of the sump and how the layout's going to look. So for the mechanical filtration, I visited Ripple's Water Life, which is in Bridgemere, and I got these pond pre-filters. So you can see they just come in big cubes of coarse sponge, but not too coarse. It'll still catch a lot of particulates. And then it's got a nice little section here for, you know, my overflow pipes to go into. So I got 2 of these and they fit so perfect and snug just inside of this first section of the sump. So I'll have these 2 pre-filters here, which will catch a lot of particulates and act as mechanical filtration. And then this section here, I'm going to fill with alpha grog. But what I need to do is, I'm going to have my return pump in this section, but I want to build a baffle. So a piece of plastic or glass. I think I'm going to try it with a piece of acrylic first. That sits here, which the water can rise up through this section, overflow into the return bit. So I'm going to try and build that baffle now. If I can't do it, then I'm just going to dump a load of biological filtration in this part of the sump anyway. But I'll give it a whirl and see if we can build a decent baffle in here that's going to hold everything in. Change of plan. We're not going with the baffles anymore. We're going to take a new approach. And I did build the baffles, I did put them in, and I had this sump looking great. But when I've done the water test on it, there was 2 problems that caused it to fail when I did that. So one is I used too thin a sheet of acrylic, so it was bending a lot behind the water pressure because I didn't equalize the chambers before I filled it up. And then also is the silicon to plastic. Silicon is not a great bonder of 2 plastic materials, so it creates a very weak bond. Although I used a very generous amount of silicon on the baffles, the water pressure just took them clean off. There's nothing for it to bond to on these surfaces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another section onto the sump. And what that means is it means I can use the walls of these containers like baffles. So I can place 2 more up here, and what that will do is that will direct the water flow so that it's making contact with the media like I need it to. And then it also gives me a bit more room to put this return pump in, and then obviously more room for biological filter media. So we'll get the holes drilled, we'll get it all solvent welded together, and then I think this one's going to be successful. Right, so I think that first tank failure was a little bit of a blessing in disguise, because I much prefer how this is looking right now. So it's a much better, more efficient setup, which gives me a lot more space as well to do what I want to do. And it's still going to fit under the breeding system. So let me show you so you can take a look at how this thing's looking. So I've got the mechanical filtration here. So this is where the water is going to go in from the overflow. It's going to go through our biological section, but I could even build a moving bed filter in here. It's got that much space. I'm not going to, because I think with the air in the cellar, with it being a lot colder, it's going to affect the temperature. So I'm just going to keep it with biological filtration. But if you're doing something like this at home, then it still gives you all the options of a sump. And then it obviously overflows into our return section, where I'm going to have my heater and my return pump as well. Like I said, I'm going to change this return pump so that it's not overpowering the system, which I think that one might do. But all in all, really chuffed with that and how that's turned out. So let's get it outside. Let's do the fill test. Let's make sure we've got no leaks or anything. And then fingers crossed, we've got a successful sump. Also as well, I can get all the lids on it. You know, I'm going to drill some holes in the top for all the plumbing to go into, but it keeps it all watertight as well. Stops any evaporation. So I think I'm onto something here. I mean, I might even build one of these for the 7-footer when it arrives, because it's like having a brand new sump. Hopefully it's watertight, but let's see. Right, so the good news is she passed the fill test, which makes it a really successful project. But what I thought I'd do is just give you a quick sneak peek into the progress on the breeding rack so far. So obviously I've got 9 smaller tanks here for babies, so I can separate them and label them, make sure I've got the right breeds in the right tanks when I come to sell them. I've got a little breeding tank here, which is 100 centimeters long, so I think it's 175 liters. And then I've got another one coming, which is going to go on the top here. So these are going to be my 2 breeding units when I want to separate the fish, put a colony in there and try and get some babies. But there's loads of possibilities with this. I might even extend it further and set up another system on that wall. And then a couple of these I might even, you know, fill with plants so that I've got some sort of refugium, because don't forget, this is all going to be plumbed off one system, all working off this custom sump what I've built, and it fits perfectly under here. So I think it's going to be a really successful little project, this. So plants in here would act as sort of like an extension to the sump, because it'll be like a refugium, absorbing nitrates and things from the water column. I shouldn't get an awful lot of evaporation because I'm going to get some lids on these tanks. I've got lids for all of the smaller ones, and then I've got lids on the sump as well. So it keeps the evaporation down, meaning that I'm not going to have to keep topping water up and things like that. And then if I can get some refugiums in here with some plants that will grow fast, then that should minimize the amount of water changes that I'm going to have to do on this system as well. So it should be really self-sufficient. I've built all the rack and everything myself. So I've built this from pieces of wood that I've got from Wix and B&Q, screwed it all together. I wish I'd have filmed it, but because of how this cellar looked earlier on, it looked like a bomb at it. It was falling to pieces. All the plaster was peeling off the walls, so I've repainted everything, touched it up. There's a couple of bits I need to do with the floor to level it out on that side as well, and get a little chair there so I can sit and enjoy all this. But it's not far off complete. So all I need to do is finish off some of the plumbing, get it all solvent welded in, hook up the sump, get some bits and bobs, substrates and things for these tanks, lights. I still need to get a few lights to go on here. If you've got any good suggestions for cheap little LED lights that I can fit under here that you might have used on breeding systems yourselves, let me know, because I'm trying to find something that's efficient, that's got a timer on it so I can put timers on to come on and off whenever I set the periods. But if you've got any suggestions, drop them in the comments, because I'm open to ideas on how to set up a lighting system on this breeding rack. So yeah, you've seen it. It's not far off complete. Once it's set up, we can start making some decent videos. I'm going to try and get hold of some really rare haps and some females and try and breed them, especially looking at stuff like, you know, Buccochromices, Malawi hawks. Malawi hawks are an absolute nightmare to get hold of in this country. So I think if I could start breeding them and get a supply of them out there, I think everyone would be really, you know, really grateful for that, because I've had a lot of people in the comments asking for them as well, because I did have one, but I could only get it in a tiny size. But I've got somebody who might be able to get me 6 or 7 of those in good adult sizes, about 6-7 inches. So fingers crossed, everything goes to plan. This is moving rather swiftly now, so I'm getting a lot of time to work on it. But if you enjoyed the video, if you found this useful, if you think you could make a sump like this yourself, it was really cheap. All the materials altogether probably cost me about 50 quid. So really cheap sump to make. And that's even with the baffles and stuff that I've thrown away as well. So Enjoy.